Today's video is a video that I've wanted to do for a long time. It is on the topic of studying the form, especially on deciduous trees. You see, at this time of the year, the leaves are gone on most of the deciduous trees. It's actually kind of almost an early spring, so we're having a lot of things starting to go into flower, but you can still see the shape of most of the deciduous trees. And the topic is more about having people learn how to see clearly. You know, if you look up at a tree and pay attention to it when the leaves are off of it, you can see clearly where the tree was pruned, or where it was hacked, or where it was topped, or if it's a virgin tree that is very, very natural. Now, the importance of this little bit of training, we'll call it tree training, how to see trees for what they are. Because, you know, the truth be known, most people are oblivious. Even a lot of tree people are oblivious. They just kind of go by and they look off, say, yep, that's a liquid amber, that's a, sycamore, or whatever, but they don't see the form. They just see it as a tree. But you have to see what's going on inside the shape of the tree, where all the damage has occurred, where all the past pruning wounds have occurred, and what future impact those pruning wounds are going to have on the safety, the integrity, the longevity of the tree, as well as future pruning needs as a result of what was done to it. So let's go on a tour. I drove around for a few hours this morning, and I got my camera out. You're even going to hear the truck running in some of these little shots here, but I want to talk about what we're seeing. So this little tree tour is looking primarily at deciduous trees, and I really hope that after this is all done, you're going to look at trees differently. So let's go for a ride. Well, I was at a job a couple days ago, and I made a clear observation. The client had a ginkgo tree, and across the street was another ginkgo tree. And to the untrained eye, you might say, yeah, those two trees look about the same. They're about the same height. They're the same age. But the tree on the left is considerably different, as is the birch tree. Both of the neighbors' trees were hacked pretty harsh. And if you look closely, the tree in the backyard, that's a big elm tree, that tree also was hacked at one time. It's hard to tell from a distance, but if you start looking closely, you can see that there's a lot of spots where this tree was cut back to and the resulting new growth was excessive. So our job was to prune out this Chinese elm, and unfortunately it had been lion-tailed sometime in the past, and we were just working on end weight. But I kept looking back at this ginkgo. I was really impressed. It was a virgin tree that had never been worked on. And in the same yard, next door to the same yard, there was a couple of really beautiful virgin birch trees. These trees don't need anything. You don't need to spend a dime on these trees. Leave them be. And then I looked over at the neighbor's birch. This tree is going to go downhill as a result of what the tree pruners did. So I went for a drive this morning. I drove around, and to my amazement, I had a really hard time finding trees that were not severely pruned or harshly pruned. This one was done multiple times. You can see the old wounds further down, and then it went up to another spot where they pruned it, and then they hacked it again. Here's another tree. You can read the old cut marks all the way around. This tree right here, you can see where it was sheared off, and the new growth came back as long, straight shoots. That's a liquid amber. This tree is a disaster. This was a silver maple that was falling apart, and they cut out all the really bad spots, and that's what they left. As this tree fills out, it's just going to self-destruct. Every one of these branches is going to fall apart. It's got no future whatsoever now, and it's all directly associated to a past pruning. So here's a nice tree. Look at this. Here's a liquid amber that has not been touched. It might be a little crowded over there on the right. It could use a little bit of thinning, but it's a beautiful tree. And then we've got this mess. These trees have been cut back so severely. These are also the silver maples. And if you look really closely, you can see that there's holes in the tree and there's fungus developing in the tree. And this is all directly associated with somebody saying, "This tree is too tall." Now here's a nice shot here. That's a sycamore tree. But if you look closely, you can see where this tree was cut back harsh at one time, and the resulting new growth came out, but it's very hard to tell on a sycamore tree. They seem to absorb their wounds much better. You know, some trees rot fast. Here's a Paean Oak. This tree has never been pruned, but this is an East Coast tree that's used to the cold weather, so it is growing abnormally wide. On the East Coast, they grow taller and narrower, and they're a great timber tree. Out here, they become these massive wide bushes. And as a result, people think that the trees need to be worked on. Ouch! That's an avocado. That just is criminal. And then we've got the fruitless mulberry trees. For some reason, everybody cuts those back to big stubs. They call that pollarding. This is a tulip tree, Liriodendron tulipifera. Gorgeous, big, beautiful, tall trees. Somebody didn't like it. There's a virgin tree. That's a Pistachia chinensis. Beautiful. There's another virgin tree. I wanted to show this in comparison to that last sycamore that I showed, and you can see this has a very natural form all the way around. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? But next door, or actually on the same property, they have a liquid amber that somebody deemed too tall, and they butchered it. They didn't even make quality cuts. This thing is a disaster. So I don't know why I know why they did it. People hate liquid ambers because they're messy. They get those liquid amber balls. Now look at this mess. You can see that was cut back really harsh, and the resulting new growth just created a fan. Now there's another process that people like to do to their trees. They turn them into nice rounded over sculpted little balls. And that's a very high maintenance job. Every single year they pay their gardeners to go through and shear everything over. There's another fruitless mulberry. This term is often referred to as pollarding. I think it's just butchering. It's expensive. It's a disaster. You know, people don't like the trees, so they cut them way, way back, and then they like the shade, but then they start over and they have to do it every year. Look at that beauty. That's a Fraxinus udii, evergreen ash, never been trimmed. There's a Crape Myrtle, never been trimmed. Isn't that perfect? That's beautiful. They don't have to touch it. If they leave it alone, it'll be perfect. Here's some liquid amber trees that somebody felt that were too tall, and they just have to shear them off. That's only a year old. There's another big liquid amber tree right here, and you can see clearly where it was chopped in half. And that one's gotten quite a bit taller. If they don't keep up on it, it's going to be dangerous. So these harsh pruning wounds end up creating high maintenance trees that ultimately rot out. Ultimately they decline. There's some beautiful birch. The birch trees, I love the white background. So look in the distance as well. Look at those trees off on the right. Look at the trees over there on the left. You can see where they were cut back at one time harshly all the way along. It's really hard to tell, but once you start paying attention, you'll see. These trees that's in somebody's backyard, somebody cut those back harsh, way, way up high. Some climber was pretty ballsy, and he got way up there and just cut that way back really, really tall. There's a tree that's virgin. Do you see the difference? Like I said, it takes a bit of really paying attention to see where a tree has not been cut. Here's a big, beautiful Quercus lobata. It's one of our gorgeous valley oaks. This tree has not been shaped. It's had a few inside cuts taken out on it, but pretty much it's a virgin tree. Now look at the neighbor's tree. Same tree. This guy deemed his tree too tall. He hired a guy with a brand new bucket truck. Beautiful bucket truck. And they just whacked the crap out of it. So, pay attention. Virgin trees, hacked trees. Both of these have never been trimmed here. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something, and please subscribe to my channel. Thanks a lot.